Elon Musk is all set to buy Twitter for $44 billion. Twitter had initially been skeptical of the billionaire's approach, but softened once Musk came up with the cash. According to the New York Times, Musk secured $13 billion in debt financing from Morgan Stanley and other lenders, as well as $12.5 billion in loans against his stock in Tesla, and the rest of Twitter's equity will be bought with $21 billion of Elon Musk's cash. The deal has us all asking what Musk wants to do with the company, which is especially relevant given his motives don't appear to be straightforwardly financial. Twitter launched in 2006 and has only made a profit in 2 years of its existence. In 2020, it made a loss of over $1 billion. Last year, it lost $220 million. All this suggests Musk is most interested in the power and influence wielded by the platform, which is used disproportionately by policymakers, journalists, and politicians. As to his priorities for the company, Musk's public comments have mostly concerned free speech. Last month, he tweeted, "Free speech is essential to a functioning democracy. Do you believe Twitter rigorously adheres to this principle?" Of the 2 million people who voted, 70% said no, 30% said yes. Elon Musk seems to agree with his followers. He went on to say, given that Twitter serves as the de facto public town square, failing to adhere to free speech principles fundamentally undermines democracy. What should be done? Earlier this month at a TED event, Musk was asked about moderation of social media platforms. This is what he said.
I think we would want to err on this. If in doubt, let the speech, let it exist. It would have, if it's a gray area, I would say let the tweet exist. But obviously, in a case where there's perhaps a lot of controversy, that you would not want to necessarily promote that tweet. So I'm not saying that I have all the answers here, but I do think that we want to be just very reluctant to delete things and have just be very cautious with permanent bans. Timeouts I think are better than sort of permanent bans, and but just in general, like I said, how it won't be perfect, but I think we wanted to really have, like I said, the perception and reality that speech is as free as reasonably possible. And a good sign as to whether there is free speech is someone you don't like allowed to say something you don't like. And if that is the case, then we have free speech. And it's damn annoying when someone you don't like says something you don't like. That is a sign of a healthy, functioning, free speech situation.
Regardless of one's approach to offensive tweets, one might ask whether the world's richest man being able to buy Twitter outright is itself a sign of a healthy, functioning free speech situation. But in terms of the most immediate effects of any takeover, what seemed clear from that answer is that Musk is opposed to permanent bans, and that could matter a lot for one man in particular, Donald Trump. Trump was banned from the platform in 2021 after the Capitol riots and following his repeated false claims that the election was stolen. At the time, Musk commented on the ban, tweeting, "A lot of people are going to be super unhappy with West Coast high tech as the de facto arbiter of free speech." Well, now, with Musk as the West Coast high-tech arbiter of free speech, Trump might be about to get a boost to his 2024 election campaign. I'm joined now by Barnaby Rain. Barnaby, what I want to know from you, billionaires buying media platforms, it's not new. We've seen Jeff Bezos buy the Washington Post as his plaything, Carlos Slim, the biggest shareholder in the New York Times. How worried should we be about this particular development, about Musk buying Twitter?
As you say, it's part of a broader phenomenon. Once upon a time in the history of capitalism, there were company towns. You worked down a mine. Your boss also owned the local shop and the local paper too. So he controlled what you ate and what you read about the world. We risk returning to that dystopia of unalloyed kind of corporate power. Meanwhile, though, and here's the strange thing, there's a panic on about free speech, but in all the wrong ways. So our government and celebrity-studded open letters announce an Orwellian drive to defend free speech from student protesters expressing their opinions, while the state's prevent agenda chills dissent, NGOs are reported to the Charity Commission if they speak out about things. Job precarity means academics worry about saying anything controversial. Employers surveil our social media, so our private space to think and talk freely shrinks. The state attacks the BBC and Channel 4 when they say things the Tory party dislikes. They want to privatize Channel 4, while more and more of our media is controlled by a handful of billionaires, from print media to new broadcast channels like GB News and Rupert Murdoch's Talk TV, to social media platforms too. And libel laws insulate from criticism those rich enough to pay the legal fees. So class war is fought on every level, including over the news we receive and how we discuss it. And it's fought by the wealthy and by the state that represents them. That's the real free speech crisis.
I've just checked Elon Musk's latest tweet a couple of hours ago. I hope that even my worst critics remain on Twitter because that is what free speech means. I assume he's trying to tweet that as sort of like a reassurance. You know, even if you criticize me, you're allowed to stay on my platform. But I just find it completely chilling. This guy, who is the richest man in the world, is just able to wake up in the morning and decide, I am going to buy one of the most important communication platforms in the world, which hundreds of millions and millions of people, communicate over, and also which does have a key role in setting the media agenda. As I say, it's not used by as many people as, for example, Facebook or Instagram, but it does set news cycles. It does sort of influence policy to a much greater degree than any of those other platforms. That's precisely why I think he wants to buy this. And the fact that he can say, don't worry, I'm going to take complete control of this platform, but I'm not going to ban you from it, I find just incredibly sinister. He's posing this decision as one based on principles. He believes in free speech in a sort of absolutist perspective. He's really not into moderation on these platforms. He's saying he just happens to be lucky enough that he can purchase this organization and put his beliefs into reality. I assume he's hoping that we're all grateful for him. There are potential avenues by which this could benefit him, both financially as well as politically, though. My colleague Aaron Bastani has a great piece up on NovaraMedia.com about this. He says, while Musk's relationship with Trump was hardly plain sailing, he left the president's advisory group after the withdrawal of the US from the Paris Agreement. Earlier this year, the Tesla CEO tweeted that Biden was a damp sock puppet in human form. With Biden promoting the likes of GM, so that's General Motors, and Chrysler, Musk feels Tesla has been consistently overlooked by a man he views as a weak politician. Buying Twitter and allowing Trump to return to the platform would certainly be one way of getting the White House to show him more respect. Barnaby, what do you think there is to that? Might it be that by posing as a free speech champion, Musk is really just trying to get greater access to the most powerful politician in the world? Well, I don't know, that could be Xi Jinping, but the American president, let's say. And this is the way of doing that. If you help the next guy get elected, then you have him to some degree in your pocket, and that means that more public cash will be flowing to his businesses.
It's a kind of through the looking glass moment, isn't it? I mean, there's a more general right-wing distortion at play here. So Elon Musk tells us that the way to defend free speech in the public sphere is to get the public sphere out of the control of the wrong billionaires and put it into the hands of the right billionaires, the ones who will act, he says, to protect our freedom. The right-wing distortion is the idea that freedom is consistent with hierarchy, the idea that any of us are free when we live in a world in which our lives are subject to the arbitrary whims of a few powerful people. Even if those powerful people lay off us, even if we live under a tyrant who allows us to walk down the street freely. The fact that we're always subject to the tyrant's decision to move their batons against us. The fact that Elon Musk could at any moment, if he controls Twitter, decide that someone's pissed him off. And frankly, this is someone who is historically not the most level-headed all the time. The fact that he could decide that someone's pissed him off this week and so he wants to ban them from Twitter, that's not a world of freedom. There are long traditions, Republican traditions, for thinking about freedom that have taught us for hundreds of years that when we live under the arbitrary power of a few, we're not free. And so a public sphere controlled by Rupert Murdoch, by the Barclay brothers, by Elon Musk, by Jack Dorsey, by Mark Zuckerberg, whoever it is, these are tiny numbers of individuals. We should have a public sphere where we're all free and we all control it democratically.
The comparison you made earlier, which I think is a smart one, was earlier stages of capitalism where you had businessmen, industrialists owning whole towns, owning the newspapers in that society. Now, I think there are a lot of similarities there. I think one which is probably going to be more familiar to our viewers because it's something which is pumped out to us constantly is somewhere like Russia, where it's, this is an oligarchy. You've got this man who owns this private militia. This man owns all of the TV stations. They're all close to Vladimir Putin. And we're supposed to see that as a sign that this is a defunct democracy. Now, there are many ways in which Russia's democracy is less democratic than ours. If you had in another country with a different political system to our own, if you had the richest person in that society buying the most significant media platform, and then you had the second richest person buying one of the most prestigious newspapers, I think we'd start to question how democratic that society was. But what we know is our media class, our ruling class, are very, very bad at looking inwards. When it's in our society, suddenly it's fine, it's normal. Oh, no. Elon Musk buying up the largest, most significant when it comes to sort of its political impact platform. That's just a rich guy who wants to defend free speech. Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post, one of the most important newspapers in the United States. That's just a guy who happens to be rich, who has an interest in investigative journalism, so he has saved a newspaper from collapsing. Regardless of Jeff Bezos's motivations, which I do have very little faith in, by the way, considering how he treats his workforce, having to rely on billionaires to keep newspapers afloat is really, really bad. And the consequences of just allowing Elon Musk to wake up one morning and say, I want to buy the most significant media platform in the world is terrible. I mean, it's also interesting because this is a publicly traded company. They can't really say no. I don't have much love for the current owners of Twitter. At least it's not one person, though. I do think it's, even less democratic when it's just one person. But they couldn't say no to this bid from Elon Musk because they have a fiduciary responsibility, which means that they have to do whatever is in the best interest of the shareholders. Now, Elon Musk has offered quite a lot of money per share. I think it's $54 per share. It was only sort of $38 per share a few weeks ago. The people currently managing and running that firm are going to have a really difficult time justifying not selling it to him. So he essentially can force the most powerful company in the world to hand over control to him if he can stack up enough cash. And he is, as we keep saying, the richest man in the world, $250 billion or so. This is not exceptional. Billionaires, as I've talked about, privately own the Washington Post. They also own the Boston Globe. Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim is the NYT's largest investor. In the UK, the Telegraph, Times, Mail, Independent, and Evening Standard are all privately owned by billionaires. This is not the sign of a healthy democracy.